tell you something about how this work actually began for me. It wasn't with a theory or a framework that somebody handed me, or a methodology that I found in a book. I like books. It began with something much more fundamental than that. A commercial instinct that has been present in everything I have done professionally for the best part of, 3 decades now. You see, I've always been in business. I've always understood that businesses exist to make money. And I've always believed that genuine authority, the kind that actually moves a market, has to be rooted in that understanding. Before I was a broadcaster, I was in business. Before I was a strategist, I was in the boardroom. I've been there since I was 23. I spent a decade working in global risk management and audit. And I've been a board member, as I say, for over 20 years. I spent 20 years in broadcasting, and 10 of those have been at the BBC. And I spent the better part of my career facilitating rooms filled with senior people navigating complex, high-stakes decisions where the gap between clarity and confusion has very real commercial consequences. The work I do now did not emerge from a background in marketing or personal branding. It's emerged from the sum total of all of that. And the journey to naming that clearly, to standing in it fully and without qualification, is exactly what I want to talk about today. Welcome to Recognised. I'm Marisha Stevenson, BBC broadcaster, executive facilitator and commercial authority positioning strategist. And this is where the gap between visibility and authority and what it takes to be recognised as the expert you already are takes place. Today, we're talking about the repositioning that nobody warns you about. It's not the external work, not the messaging or the platforms or the strategy. It's the internal work. The part that has to happen first. Because without it, everything else is performance. And the market will sense the difference, even when it can't name it. When I began articulating this work publicly, I was approaching it through the lens of media expertise. Because what I kept seeing across 2 decades in broadcasting was professionals being handed significant platforms and not capitalising on them. It wasn't through lack of talent, and it wasn't even through lack of genuine expertise or even interesting things to say. But I noticed through a fundamental misunderstanding of what those moments are actually for. And sadly, I've heard people say with genuine indifference that they were not particularly fussed about media coverage, that an interview was just an interview, that once it was over, it was over. What they were not seeing was that every platform, every media opportunity, every moment of visibility is a positioning event. And what you do with it determines whether it compounds into something that builds your commercial authority or evaporates the moment it ends. That observation repeatedly across hundreds of interactions over years became the foundation of what was Media Impact Lab. But building it required me to do something I'd not fully anticipated. I had to reposition myself. Now let me be specific about what that transition actually looked like. Because this is where I realised the detail does matter. The shift I was making was not a single step. It was a synthesis. From event host to executive facilitator. From media professional to commercial authority strategist. From someone understood primarily through the lens of broadcasting to someone whose offer brings together media expertise, risk and audit thinking, 23 years of board level expertise, executive facilitation, and a deep commercial understanding of what authority actually has to do to create genuine opportunity. From the outside, that might look like a significant reinvention, but from the inside, it felt like something very different. It felt like finally naming what had always been true. But that clarity didn't arrive without resistance. And the resistance didn't come from the market, it didn't come externally. It actually came from inside. When I began stepping more fully into the role of executive facilitator, what people call imposter syndrome arrived precisely on schedule. Is this something I can genuinely do? Am I claiming something that is not yet mine to claim? And then I did what I would now tell any client to do in that moment. I had to look at the evidence honestly. 20 years of high pressure broadcast communication, operating in live environments where there's no margin for error, nowhere to hide, and clarity or lack of is not optional. 23 years in boardrooms and governance structures where the standard is precision, accountability, and the ability to move a room toward a decision. A decade in global risk management and audit, which is fundamentally the discipline of understanding the gaps and where they are between where an organisation thinks it is and where it actually is. A career facilitating complex conversations between senior stakeholders with competing priorities and significant things at stake. The imposter syndrome was asking, are you really an executive facilitator? The evidence was answering, what exactly do you think I've been doing? The discomfort was not a signal that I was overclaiming. It was just normal friction between stepping into a space that, even though it was already mine, I had not fully inhabited it, and certainly not in public. I want to talk to you about something that almost always gets misunderstood when we talk about repositioning: boundaries. Now, it's not in the sense of making yourself smaller, not in the sense of cautious or hedging self-definition that keeps capable people operating below their level of expertise. It's actually something more specific and more demanding than that. It's the discipline of not reverting to old patterns when the new identity feels exposing. Because that is actually what happens in repositioning. It's not that you're claiming too much, but that when you get that new space, it feels uncomfortable. When a conversation pulls you towards the safer, more familiar former version of yourself, it's natural to default. You'll soften your claim. You'll reach for the old language. You accept work that belongs to the previous chapter because saying no to it feels presumptuous, particularly when the new positioning is not yet fully established. That reversion isn't really humility. It's a failure of conviction. And it costs you more than you realise. Because every time you step back into the old positioning under pressure, you're actually reinforcing it. In the market's understanding, and more importantly, in your own. The boundaries that matter in repositioning are not the ones that limit what you claim. They are the ones actually that protect what you are becoming from the gravitational pull of what you were. So here is what I've come to understand about my own journey and my own positioning, and why I think the journey to that understanding for you is relevant, and for anyone who actually does listen to this. Most people in the authority positioning and personal brand space are coming from a marketing background. And you know what? Their expertise in communication, in audience building, in the mechanisms of visibility, those expertise are real, and it is very valuable. But it is incomplete for the kind of work that I do, because commercial authority positioning is not primarily a communication challenge. It can involve it, but it is a commercial challenge. It's about understanding at a structural level the gap between where any expert or a leader currently sits in the market and where they're genuinely capable of warranting a space. It's about understanding risk. The risk of unclear positioning, of misaligned audiences, of borrowed authority that actually is about to expire. It's about board level thinking, the kind that asks not what story are you telling, but what decisions does that positioning need to support and what does it need to produce commercially. It's the combination of audit and risk thinking, broadcast media expertise, board level governance experience, and executive facilitation. And those things are not a collection of separate skills. It's a single coherent capability for seeing the full picture. And that's what the Commercial Authority, formerly known as the Media Impact Lab, does. And the reason it does it in the way it does it is because of everything that went into building the person who runs it, me. So this is not a rebrand, it's not a pivot, it's a synthesis. When people come to me about authority positioning, they are almost always thinking about the external work, the messaging, the platforms, the visibility strategy. And all of those things have a place. But before any of it can work properly, there is a question that has to be answered clearly and honestly from the inside. Who am I now? Not who I was, not who am I in the process of becoming, but who am I now, right now, with the full weight of everything I have built, everything I've learned, and everything I have earned. Because the market does not just read your positioning statement. It reads you. It reads the gap between what you say about yourself and what you believe about yourself. And the hesitation in the pricing conversation, or the over-explanation in the introduction, the reaching back towards the safe, familiar former identity when the new one feels exposed. And the professionals who reposition most effectively are not the ones who get the external work right first. They're the ones who do the internal work thoroughly enough that the external work simply reflects something that is already true. You are not becoming something you are not. You are finally building an accurate description of what you already are. So, when that description is clear, coherent, and held with complete conviction, the market does not need to be convinced. It simply recognizes. This is Recognized. I'm Marisha Stevenson. The full written version of this essay is on my Substack at marishaspeaks.substack.com. And if this landed for you in a way that makes you want to do the work, the Commercial Authority is where that conversation begins. Not just the external repositioning, but remember, the full thing. The clarity, the conviction, and the commercial strategy to make it legible to the people who most need to understand it. The link is in the show notes, and if this resonated, please share it with somebody who is in the middle of their own transition and has not yet found the language for what they are navigating. Until next time, stay visible, stay credible, and most importantly, stay recognized.